And what about their microphones?
And four speakers, so one for you as a moderator,
Yeah.
and one for
So I
speakers,
click
and
on
they can.
And it's on.
Yeah, you may.
Yeah. Okay.
Fortunately, we have some problems with them, so maybe there will be need to change.
Okay,
the-
as
but I
long
hope
as
that everything
I'm-
will be okay.
Okay, let's go and sit down. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Nice to meet you.
I invite.
Yes.
Thank you. Jij begint, dus dan leg ik het even hier. Good morning. And I'm glad such a full house. We're going to run a tight ship. We don't have a lot of time. So I would like to start off with Mr. Gert-Jan Koopman, Director General of DG NEAR in the European Commission. Gert-Jan, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Tony. Good morning, dear colleagues, dear friends, supporters of Ukraine. It is really a pleasure to welcome you here this morning at what I think is a really important conversation on the economic competitiveness and reconstruction of Ukraine, looking at this from the perspective of our overriding mission of fighting climate change. We all know that a world where we leave climate change to run unabatedly is unlivable. And obviously that is why everyone is here at the COP working towards net zero. At the same time, Ukraine, of course, is involved in a war for its very existence, fighting for its very existence. And the climate cost of this war is incredibly significant. Just one statistic, a third of the overall wartime emissions is attributable to the quantity of steel and concrete that will be needed to reconstruct the damaged schools, houses, buildings, and infrastructure. So if you look at it from this perspective, the long-term impact on emissions will hinge quite fundamentally on the way in which the country will be reconstructed. And here, of course, there is a choice. Either the country reconstructs relying on pre-existing techniques. We all know that Ukraine had an emission intensity of economic activity, so CO2 emissions per unit of GDP, that was 5 times as high as that of the EU. So if we go back to that level of CO2 intensity, pre-war intensity, and we picture Ukraine being successful as it integrates the European Union, we will see an explosion of emissions going forward. So that is a choice which may look convenient because it relies on tried and tested technologies, but it's clearly completely unsustainable, which means that the other choice of building back better and relying on advanced technologies, leapfrogging into the advanced standards which we are setting ourselves in the European Union, is maybe more daunting and challenging, but it is in reality the only choice. Now, the good news is this, that obviously the European Union will be supporting Ukraine in this endeavor. Through the Ukraine facility, we are making available 50 billion euros of support that is conditional on the reforms which Ukraine has signed up to, and which are aligned with not just the accession process, but also the necessities of the green transition. Within this 50 billion, there is an investment facility that will mobilize up to 40 billion euros of private sector capital. And I think this is really the key to this green reconstruction of Ukraine. So the tools are there, and obviously we are not the only ones contributing through the donor coordination platform that I have the honor of co-presiding together with Ukraine and the US. We are making available much larger volumes of support for reconstruction that should be informed by the same environmental and economic logic. So I think the panel today, focusing on these subjects, is talking about something that is essential, not just at the very present, but is crucial for the long-term sustainability of Ukraine's economy. And I wish all of us an excellent conversation. Thank you very much. Tony, back to you.
Thank you very much. And also thank you for your leadership in this enlargement process. Then may I ask Deputy Minister Alexandra Kava for 5 minutes of introduction as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a hand.
Dear colleagues, I'm very glad to take part in this event. Ukraine is now in the situation of war, and unfortunately, every day we receive information about casualties, about destructions. But despite all the situation, we think about future. We think about Ukrainian victory and reconstruction of Ukrainian infrastructure, Ukrainian villages and Ukrainian towns and Ukrainian cities. And we, from the governmental point of view, do everything possible to secure this reconstruction is the most climate-friendly conditions in order to make all our new schools, new hospitals, new administrative buildings, new plants to be fully in line with requirements of climate policy and minimizing the emissions of CO2. Also, from governmental point, now we pay much attention to decreasing emissions in the sectors where it is possible to do even now, like upgrade of Ukrainian transport system, which became the main route for transportation of Ukrainian goods to European markets and to world markets after blockade of seaports. It comes in electrification of railways, which lead to borders with European Union, as well as electrification and transition to electric municipal transport. All these efforts that we do will result in more modern and more developed Ukrainian economy and ecologically friendly policy, despite the war and all bad news that we receive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Now we're going to start the session, the whole session. There are 2 sessions. Because of time, I'm going to cut my introductory remarks, and I think it's much more interesting to listen to the group. I'd already would like to say that the predicament of Ukraine is clear for everyone, even though we perhaps cannot understand personally what it means to be under such a barrage. I've spoken yesterday to Tatiana, and with such grace and calm under such pressure is immense. But today we want to establish 2 things. The first, the necessity, why it is so important to already start investing in a clean, a green, a sustainable economy for Ukraine, which is a candidate member state and has to converge to the EU for its own benefit, its own health, and its own competitiveness in a future, in a peaceful future. But at the second session of the panel is, after we've established that, how are we going to get there? How are we going to make those financial flows and investments come in there and be effective as they can? And of course, the elephant in the room is doing all of this while the war is still ongoing and ravaging Ukraine. I'll stop there because I want to use the time for our August panel. May I invite Mr. Alexander Kava to the chair and the first panelists, Ivana Zivkovic, Philip Offenberg, and Ambassador Jean-Charles Elleman-Kinkombe, please. And then I'll briefly introduce them to you as they come forward. First, you just heard Deputy Minister of the Finance of Ukraine, Alexander Kava. He's been serving as the Deputy Minister of Finance since August 2020. Prior to these positions, he held prominent roles in Ukraine's public sector with a strong focus on infrastructure and public finance. And he started his career as a stock market, I like that, analyst. So he's smart. I mean, you all are, but just wanted to say that. Then Ms. Ivana Živković, Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia from Croatia, has served as Assistant Secretary General, Assistant Administrator, and Director of the Regional Bureau for Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States at the UNDP. Then Ambassador Jean-Charles Ellerman Kingomba, Assistant Secretary General for Innovation, Hybrid, Cyber at NATO, and he just assumed this new job, but you had your boots on the ground in Afghanistan, so you had some firsthand experience. And finally, I want to welcome Mr. Philip Offenberg, who's the director the Europe Director of Breakthrough Energy from the Gates Foundation. And well, that's great. Welcome that you are all here. Really good. I have this microphone rolling down all the time. 1 second. And we prepared some questions for you, and we would like to ask you to see if you can answer them as succinctly as possible within 3 minutes. And I'd like to start with Alexander Kava, the Deputy Minister, and come to you and say, Ukraine as an EU candidate country, you committed to the Green Deal. Can you tell us how you think it will transform the Ukrainian economy and also for the betterment of your people? And I'll give you the microphone.
Thank you very much. Ukrainian economy is now in the period of serious transition because we have many damages to our plants, to our economic sectors. For example, in Mariupol, we lost 50% of Ukrainian steel mill production. And Ukraine, as a rich company in deposits of iron ore, has potential to develop this industry, but with more ecologically friendly technologies, because the plants which were destroyed in Mariupol, they were built in the beginning of 20th century and did not respond to modern standards of steel production. And from a governmental point, we do much to promote new technologies in all sectors of economy. We promote electric transportation instead of using the diesel ones. We create opportunities for new standards to be implemented in Ukraine to replace the old Soviet standards, so that all buildings for housing, for administrative purpose, and for business should respond to requirements of the best green approaches. So we see that after the war, Ukraine will be like a good European country in corresponding to all standards of Green Deal approach. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And the way you describe it as the destruction of century-old business model is terrible, but it also allows you to build back better on the most modern way. And I was impressed. I heard yesterday the rollout of EVs in Ukraine and the rollout of many grids, and the taxation policies of that is really a great stimulus. And actually, we could learn perhaps in the EU from you as well. So thank you very much for that. Then I'd like to turn to Ms. Ivana Živković from UNDP. Why is integrating climate considerations into Ukraine's recovery so essential for its long-term competitiveness, but also, as you probably would say, for its survival? And should we start now, even as the war continues to rage?
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be a part of this esteemed panel. And yes, embedding climate and action into recovery efforts of Ukraine are crucial to compete in the low carbon global economy. By integrating these policies now, Ukraine can prevent future costs and make its industries more competitive in international markets. And this is what we aim at supporting at UNDP. When it comes to Ukraine facility, we're pleased to see that about 1/5 of funding will be directed towards climate change mitigation and adaptation, also towards environmental protection, including biodiversity and conservation, and also the green transition. Second element is building back better that we have heard about already from the Deputy Minister. And this is about incorporating climate considerations into rebuilding, but also at this moment when we're still in the relief efforts. For example, we as UNDP are making sure that debris removal is done in an environmentally safe way, where we separate cement, glass, environmentally hazardous materials such as asbestos, and reuse them then in rebuilding. Additional efforts are being paid to energy efficiency, not only now during the war, but also have started before the war. And not only in building the energy efficient new buildings, but rather to retrofit the old infrastructure, especially hospitals and schools and some of the other infrastructure that is very much needed now. And thirdly, the renewable energy, which is which has very high potential in Ukraine, and also, of course, as it reduces the greenhouse gas emissions and carbon footprint, also provides additional energy security to the country. So I would say it is essential in competitiveness of the overall economy to invest in these efforts now, and Ukraine has been doing it already, and by introducing the climate law as well, and proclaiming the 2050 as the year, the aim of the cutting the greenhouse gas emissions, so net zero footprint. So I congratulate on that. Despite all the other priorities, higher priorities, I think climate is a very important area that UNDP also works in. Thank you.
Thank you. And that sounds like great work by the UNDP. And I take your point about avoiding stranded assets. So the whole necessity to build back better, but also your point about perhaps, and that's something that Ambassador Jean-Charles can come into, the security element of a modern electricity grid and production compared to the old way. But Ambassador, what role does your Ukrainian clean reconstruction play from that security perspective and enhancing both strategic autonomy and energy security in Ukraine and in the EU? And how to ensure that a Ukrainian future energy system is both sustainable and secure? So what should our priorities be in that regard?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Coming from an alliance which is very preoccupied by security, obviously that has a specific focus here. There is a here and now, and there's a long-term issue. For the here and now, obviously, we are very concerned about the relentless, ongoing Russian bombardment campaign, with the only purpose of dismantling the power system of Ukraine. So the here and now focus is how to stop this. This will require providing Ukraine with the necessary means to defend themselves, electronic warfare, air defense systems. And I think this is an area where we at NATO try to support as much as we can, actively encourage allies to provide Ukrainians with the necessary systems. So that's the here and now. Then there is the long-term design of the energy system of Ukraine. And I think there are important lessons to be learned from the current situation. First of all, we've seen that redundancy matters. To redundancy is also tied very much to the issue of decentralization. So these are two important features in the design of the system of tomorrow. We are seeing already that the transformation is happening. There are lots of and that the green transformation is already adding to redundancy. Lots of small decentralized activities. We're also seeing that forces using, for instance, solar solar panels to power up their communication systems rather than diesel-based power systems is also actually providing positively to the security of the operations. So I think there are a lot of interesting things happening on the ground that will inspire the long-term efforts. We know that our Ukrainian friends are, as always, super ambitious, have already set themselves important targets in how to increase the use of green energy. These ambitions will require massive investments, and therefore I come back to, I think, the here and now. I think for those massive investments to happen, we need the active engagement of the private sector. That will only happen in the long term if we provide Ukraine with a lasting and fair peace, with the real firm guarantees needed for the country to develop. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think the lasting piece is good for everything. And we should help them as much as we can, as long as it takes. Mr. Philip Offenberg from Breakthrough Energy, I'll ask you, what role can renewable energy sources like solar, wind, hydropower play in strengthening Ukraine's economy resilience? Basically, what are its comparative advantages, and how can that also help its energy independence?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Good to be here. I think all of these renewable sources that you mentioned can play an important role. I'll start with solar, which is abundant, local, and cost-effective. It was already mentioned by the ambassador. It really adds to the resilience of the energy system, and mostly at installation level. In 2022, so before the war, Ukraine had a total installed PV capacity of 7.6 gigawatt, which is 80% of the renewables they have. So that is already quite something to build on. Then there's wind, which obviously you can say a wind farm is less resilient at the installation level, but it is also adding resilience to your energy system, because you plug it in the power system big time. Before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine had 34 wind farms, mainly in the south and southeast, 85% situated in the Black and Azov Sea. And what we see from our analysis, there's massive offshore wind potential in Ukraine, mostly thanks to the shallow waters that you have in the Azov and Black Seas, the Dnieper Cascade and the Dniester Reservoir. Apologies for the mispronunciation. The World Bank estimates Ukraine has around 251 gigawatts of potential capacity in offshore wind. And out of that, 183 gigawatts are fixed and 68 gigawatts are floating offshore wind. So that's a massive comparative advantage that Ukraine can build on. Hydro and biomass and geothermal, we also looked at that, the alternatives to wind and solar. The big benefit here is quick deployment and further diversification. There's a hydro capacity already installed of 6,300 megawatts. There is a lot of biomass potential, which, as you know, can be used as biogas, then also for electricity generation. In 2022, there were already 73 biogas plants in Ukraine. And the geothermal potential that we estimate is around 10 gigawatts, which could basically replace the indirect gas imports that you currently have from Russia. And finally, that is a project that we're embarking on now, is the use of local waste for energy production, where we're trying to increase the recycling rate basically from 5% to 30% and use some of that for energy generation. So across the board, a lot of potential that will help the Ukrainian economy and also Europe's wider energy security.
Thank you very much, Philip. And just very brief recap before we go to the audience. We heard the commitment from the Ukrainian government. We heard the support from UNDP. We heard about the security predicament of Jean-Charles, ambassador at NATO. And we heard about the huge, enormous potential by Philip from Breakthrough. I think that's a very good combination. I'd like to go to the floor and the audience and to see if there are any, we have some time for a few questions to all of them or to any of them. And then, of course, the answers now will have to be short so we can keep the flow. I know I'd like to call on the Finnish ambassador. Please, do you have a microphone or will you be given one?
Thank you very much. I'm Kirsti Narinen, the Finnish ambassador to this region, but also obviously following very closely. And I also had the opportunity to work at the Hybrid Center of Excellence in Helsinki, which is NATO EU based. So my question, I give a short brief on Finland first, but then my question is about resilience, which is obviously also a Finnish term. So first of all, why does Russia, why does the aggressor bomb the energy installments and electricity network? That's because they want to undermine the government. They want to question the legitimacy of the government, and then eventually kind of dismantle the resilience of the people so that they would build and choose a government which is more favorable for their aims. And I think this is something that we have to always remember. And this so that it's not just the electricity, it's the political aim. And the same, of course, applies to the environmental damages. The aggressor, of course, pays less attention to the greater impacts, for instance, environmental impact on the Black Sea, shipping on the Black Sea, and the global food security. Finland has significantly supported the energy sector, and I think it's very important to remember there's a lot of voluntary support for that. There are companies and individuals, and there's a 97% support for the humanitarian support of the people of Finland to Ukraine, which means that the government has to deliver. And Finland is a part of the co-chairing of this working group of the peace formula, chapter 8 for this environment. So my question is, how do you keep the resilience of the people? What can be done to support that? And what do we need to do to also to keep the resilience of the Europeans and the European institutions that would keep on supporting Ukraine militarily, which is the first target, of course, but also in various ways. And what I found in this session very interesting and very inspiring is that actually your interventions were full of optimism, that this is actually more of an opportunity than just the entire destruction of your society. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador. On behalf of the EU, I can say this is not charity. This is also benign self-interest, and we will stay the course. So that's covered, I think, and the EU accession process and everything. But I'd like to pass over, perhaps start with Alexander, because I think it's mostly to you.
Yes, thank you for your question. Actually, Ukraine needs support from European Union, from other partners in terms of weapons, because we cannot supply by ourselves with weapons as of now in enough ways, despite we paid much attention to upgrade and expansion of weapon production inside Ukraine. Also, we need direct budgetary support. Unfortunately, after the war started, we lost a quarter of Ukrainian economy, and expenses of our budget grew dramatically. And as of now, half of Ukrainian state budget is formed for international grants and international loans. So the more grants we will receive, the better we will be able to oppose to Russian aggression. And of course, we also need more foreign direct investment inside Ukraine, because we have some more safe regions like Western Ukraine, central part of Ukraine, and there are many opportunities for business to open new production lines, to create new workplaces for Ukrainians. And also the economy is a serious source for financing of our capacity to resist to Russians, because it's not obvious for many people, but in order to finance the war from governmental point of view, we need an economy which will generate the taxes and duties to fill these gaps in the state budget that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience who would like to? Please identify yourself. So
Hello,
we all
thank you
know.
very much. Viktor Parlikov, I'm the Minister of Energy of Moldova. And first of all, I'm glad to be here. And I'm very glad that the tone of the discussion is about not just reconstruction of Ukraine, reconstruction or rebuilding of Ukraine on a new principles of a clean and green, etc. But this is all nice picture in the future. Today, people of Ukraine are suffering, and today we all understand that Ukraine cannot resist without the support of the international community, the consolidation of the international community. Now, my question, coming from a country which has been recently going through kind of rounds of elections and now is entering a new elections period, is that we have a very painful experience of learning how the informational warfare, how the hybrid attacks, hybrid threats, ideological subversion can, how do you call it, tear apart the canvas of the society and the distort and destroy this cohesion that is necessary to provide long-term support to Ukraine. So my question would probably be towards you. You probably noticed that what do we do and how do we ensure that the instruments that are now used against modern democracies, against which exploit freedom of speech, which exploit existing technological communication platforms, that they are not used to tear apart the social cohesion? And how do we protect our democracies and our societies from tampering, including at the elections level?
Minister, that is an excellent question. I think that almost deserves a full day conference, because it's not only for Moldova and Ukraine, it also goes for the EU and our Western societies. I'd ask the ambassador to briefly comment on it, but then I'd like to come back for the right reasons, but a great question.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's fair to say that the full spectrum of hybrid warfare has been rolled out in Moldova. I'm going there myself next week, and energy is certainly one of the tools. We are seeing by the end of this year the energy agreement will expire. There is a fair assessment that this will lead to price hikes, and that these again will be used in a campaign with the ambition of causing further destabilization ahead of next year's election. So we are seeing how hybrid warfare and energy are going hand in hand. Resilience, I think, is an effort that goes across a wide range of domains. Many of them at play also in your country, and we are working closely with your country and in our own societies to build that resilience. And I think coming back to our conversation here, it's about how we design our own energy systems to withstand pressure. It's how we have a general consolidation of information, civil society, etc. Many of the things that we are supporting and work with you in your country.
Thank you very much for that. We have time for one more question before we segue into the second panel. Who dares? This is the moment. No one. Okay. Well, in that case, before I thank you very much for your inspiring answers and also the optimism that was out there. Before yesterday, I knew that the energy system of Ukraine had been destroyed up until 20%, which was left, and winter is coming. But yesterday I heard that because of the innovation, because of the resilience, because of the strong soul of the Ukrainians, which is a very important signal, it's back up to 70%, 70%. And you will have some blackouts, as I understood, but you will bear this winter. And I think that is a tribute to that resilience. And it also is important for the second panel, because it shows that for any investor, there are some returns on investment. And going back to the Minister of Moldova, absolutely, the war is raging. We're not naive, but we want to make sure that while we keep the lights on, at the same time, we plan for the future. So thank you so much for this panel. I'd like to invite you to switch seats with the next panel. Yes, please. Give him a hand. Yeah, understood. So good so far?
Perfect.
Okay. May I invite Tatiana Sakaruk, Andrew McDowell, Morten Dirholm, Andrew Steer, and Alexander Kava again. Sorry, you have to, I hope we have enough seats. There we go. And as they take their seats, allow me again to introduce them to you. Forgive me for the order, it's completely random. But first, Andrew McDowell, Director General of the European Investment Bank, and he works at the division of the EIB responsible for operations outside the EU. And he used to be a former chief economic advisor to the Ireland's Taoiseach during a very pivotal time, the Euro crisis, which I remember well. So you have quite some firsthand experience of how to deal with the difficult predicaments. Secondly, Dr. Andrew Steer, President and CEO, former Director General of DFID, Climate Envoy for the World Bank, Bezos Earth Fund, and you also worked for the World Resources Institute, which is a very important and renowned institute we still work with. So welcome. Then Mr. Morten Dirholm, Group Senior Vice President for Marketing, Communication, Sustainability, and Public Affairs at Vestas. Vestas, of course, is a global leader in sustainable energy solutions, and he oversees the company's global marketing strategies, communication efforts, and sustainability initiatives. And let me see, finally, I have Ms. Tatiana Sakaruk, Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network in Ukraine. She leads efforts to embed sustainable development principles and corporate responsibility into Ukraine's private and public sector. And in 2024, she was also elected chair of the Regional Network Council for Eastern Europe, Central Asia. So welcome here. I'm very glad that you're all here. And now I have to quickly find the questions that I've prepared with the team for you. And I'd like to start with Ms. Sakharuk, the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Ukraine. What specific risks do investors face in Ukraine, according to you, and how can these risks be effectively addressed and by whom?
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. If you go to the AI platforms and ask these questions to AI, the top 3 risks that you may see there is security, political risks, and corruption. This is the common trend, how the international society perceive Ukraine. And this is the easiest way how to say no to the investment, to the partnership, to the collaboration. But those companies and those donors who go deeper and want to know more about Ukraine, they see the great effort and great shift from what has been before the war and what we have right now. Because the Ukrainian society, the business society, want changes, need changes to save our country. And we have great examples how the transparency in business helps to attract international donors. Last year at the Ukraine Recovery Conference, together with the FCDO and the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, we launched the project Ukraine Business Compact. This is the initiative that invites international businesses across the world to consider Ukraine as a potential market. Today, we have 750 signatories of this initiative from 52 countries. And one of the principles of this initiative is anti-corruption. It means that the situation is changing, but we need more partnerships. Also, the Global Compact leads the initiative, Ukraine Energy Initiative, that gathers ready-to-build projects from Ukrainian private sector in energy sphere that we try to promote on international arena and seek the donors and investors into this sphere. And answering the second part of the question, what can be done to address these risks is the first partnerships. And today we have Vestas who will probably talk about these opportunities in Ukrainian energy sphere. We have other examples as well, but we need more. And the second is the clear demonstration to the international society, our integrity principles and how private sector in Ukraine can work in accordance with the European standards.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sakharuk. I'd like to direct the second question to Mr. Morten Deerholm from Vestas. Wind systems. The war has severely damaged Ukraine's renewable energy systems and infrastructure, making replacement challenging and future investments perhaps uncertain. How can these challenges actually be turned into opportunities, and can they?
Well, thank you. Last year's COP, I was fortunate enough to sign a wind power project, the intention to build a 500 megawatt wind power project in Ukraine with our partners of DTEC. And we are getting close to the point where we can finally announce it, but it has taken a year just to get the financing piece in place. That's how hard it is right now to create the right frameworks around these investments. And it is only possible because DTEC is such a strong partner, but also because the Danish government, where my country is from, has been extremely helpful in the process, not only through the export credit finance of Denmark, IFO, but also the Ministry of Finance in Denmark was really stepped in. But it took a lot of efforts from the Danish government, from us, and from DTEC to actually get this going. But we are showing that it's possible. That's the good part here. And for 500 megawatts of wind energy, that's for Ukraine in a situation where Ukraine needs all the decentralized electricity that they can get. But I'm really ambitious. You know, I already would love now to start talking about 7 gigawatts of wind. We heard before the resources of Ukraine's wind energy is absolutely immense. The need for electricity is absolutely immense. And we need to, as fast as possible, get as many green electrons flowing into the system as possible. So I really would love to be ambitious, and already now, together with the Danish government, together with our partners in Ukraine, together with the ministry, together with EIB, World Bank, other good partners, sit down, make a plan for 7 gigawatts, and see if we can accelerate that as soon as possible. That's really my ambition, and I hope today's event can mark the start of that plan.
Well, you certainly helped with your, the fact that as an entrepreneur, you're so hopeful, but you're also speaking about private and public, because the public part of this seemed to be very important to get it off the.
Absolutely. The risks around these kinds of projects, of course, are immense when you're in a horrible situation that Ukraine is in. But we actually commissioned a project already last year. Now it's been damaged slightly, so we are repairing it, but we are showing that it's possible.
It can be done. Thank you so much. Now to Mr. Steer, President and CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund. What are key international best practices in mobilizing private capital for green transformation across economies?
Well, first, let me say how impressive it is that this conversation is going on and the work and the planning is going on. I was struck during the first panel. It reminded me that, it was in 1944 when World War II was still raging that the World Bank and the IMF were created. And that paid off hugely, and they planned for the reconstruction of Europe. You're not only doing that, but you're actually rebuilding while the war's still on. You're going one step further, and it is truly inspiring. Now, with regard to the question, I think we are learning quite a bit. about how important it is to engage the private sector early and to think through blended finance in a really professional way. If you look at sort of the big initiatives going out there at the moment in terms of transition, some of them are called JETPs, the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. Very good politics, government, G7 and European Union engaging in a professional way with South Africa, then Indonesia, then Vietnam. What didn't happen though was bringing in the private sector and other financiers early. And what happened was, and is happening still, is that early promises from governments haven't been able to be delivered. And the private sector is sort of keen to engage, but needs to know more policy, needs to know more about de-risking opportunities. And we've lost the thread a bit, quite frankly. So I would say sort of the lesson number one is the private sector obviously needs to know what policies are going to be over the long term, so has a legitimate role engaging with the host government. Second, you need all of the concessional funders to be able to see precisely what is required by the private sector. Too much of concessional funding today is still, if you like, standalone, a dollar in or a euro in, and a euro of output, so to speak. But what we now need to do is, for each euro that goes in, you need 6 or 10 euros of private investment. And that is actually happening at the project level around the world, but it is not happening for big initiatives such as this. So it seems to me, and that, by the way, I mean, I speak on behalf of philanthropy here. There's about $10 billion of philanthropic grant money every year for mitigation. And that needs also to be leveraged. The philanthropists need to be sitting at the table and need to be asked by governments and the private sector, look, you need to use your dollars in a leveraged way as well. As I look back at sort of my own career, one of the things that I had the privilege of doing was chairing the Aceh Reconstruction Fund after the terrible tsunami in 2004. It was a very, very successful process, but we didn't bring in the private sector at an early stage. And I think we would have done much better had we done that.
Thank you. And that's building on what Merton said about these public-private partnerships when it comes to long-term regulatory security. I think the Green Deal EU does it. And by implication, that goes for Ukraine as it's moving towards the EU. So that provides, I would hope, that long-term security of where it's going and invite investments. And then I take your point about philanthropy that should be guided better and leveraged better. Thank you very much, Andrew. And to the next Andrew McDowell of EIB, what is needed for international financial institutions to play a stronger role in mobilizing resources to long-term climate goals in Ukraine?
Well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation today. I mean, this may sound flippant, but obviously the easiest way to secure long-term IFI commitment is for us all to help Ukraine win a just and secure peace. I mean, that's obviously the first thing. But for our part, and speaking on behalf of the European Investment Bank, we need to obviously stay the course, show long-term commitment, and indeed flexibility. And let's remember, MDBs, multilateral development banks like EIB, were not necessarily set up to work in wartime conditions. We're a long-term investment and infrastructure financier. And that's why we do need to show commitment and flexibility. Earlier or last month, in fact, I'm new to, I've just come back to head up EIB Global about 6 weeks ago. Spent some time at the European Investment Bank before, went to the private sector, back to EIB now. And my first act coming back to the European Investment Bank was to bring to our board of directors a Ukraine energy rescue plan. And there was something of an irony in this, because at the heart of that plan was flexibility in EIB to finance gas assets once again. Irony, because my last act in the European Investment Bank before I left was to stop EIB lending for fossil fuels and gas. And I say this
because it does demonstrate our commitment to set aside our normal policies to reflect the fact that we're now working in wartime conditions. And in the short term, we need to acknowledge, and we have acknowledged, that we need to do things that we would not do anywhere else. Obviously, we also then have a longer term commitment in EIB to work with partners on obviously the decarbonization of the economy consistent with Ukraine's own national energy and climate plans. And quite frankly, that will require massive amounts of technical assistance on our part to prepare those projects. Just one other point, though, among the multilateral development banks, I think we need to work even better together as a system in supporting Ukraine. I do think Ukraine actually has been the place where we have worked already very well together, ourselves, EBRD, World Bank. I think we can go even further in working well as a system, and in particular, through mutual reliance. And what I mean by that is exceptionally, we need to rely on each other's due diligence and preparation of projects, including around disbursement conditions. So we're not burdening Ukraine with parallel and duplicated requests for due diligence requirements, project conditionality, disbursement conditions, that we rely on each other and trust each other to manage that. And I think that would be a very important demonstration of the commitment of IFIs to Ukraine's recovery and success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for that. Flexibility and not overburdening with all our different predicaments from every different institution. Well heard. Finally, Deputy Minister Alexander Kamba, what actions is your government committed to take, or what have you done? And what can you perhaps even do better to get these private investments in?
From a position of government, we cooperate very closely with European Investment Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction of Development, with World Bank, not only on the funds for the governmental support, but also to promote projects with private sector, especially if it comes to European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and International Financial Corporation, which is part of World Bank. You make some instrument of financing, a cover of risks which come to new projects. Which we try to mitigate the partial risks related to the investments and new entrepreneurships which come to Ukraine in situation. Also, we are considering changes to our tax legislation. We have a special law about grant investments. If the company is ready to invest more than $30 million to one project, we partially cover the expenditures for infrastructure needed to establish this new facility. Also, we have a program for construction of new industrial parks, which also take some part of expenditures on the public side. And we have a program to promote investment in small and mid-sized business. It's a program called 579, which covers partially the interest rates, because as of now we have on the market rather high interest rates, in order to promote new companies, new entrepreneurs to come to the market. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not going to walk over there again. Well, thank you very much. I think you were all so tight. I hope I didn't scare you, but this is really good. Before we go to the floor, just to summarize, as Tatiana, you said, it's too easy to say corruption. In fact, Ukraine, and I've learned, Ukraine has done a hell of a lot, forgive the word, to tamper down. I think it's important that people know on the potential, as Martin, as was said before in the earlier, 251 gigawatts of potential offshore, on land. I think that means there's a lot of there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of reward with the risk, the importance of public-private partnership, the importance of flexibility, but also the not overburdening with hundreds of duplicate conditions. guiding philanthropy, guiding philanthropy, providing regulatory security, and then finally, as you said, those initiatives you're taking to attract it. You said $30 million. I'd like to say 32 million euros. The industrial parks and the 579 interest for SMEs. So I just want to make sure that everyone gets the main points. And I'd like to hand it over to the audience again. Who would like to? I see two. You were just first. Could you, somebody give a microphone and identify yourself and ask your question succinctly, preferably.
Thank you. My name is Manfred Schepers. I'm the CEO of ILX Fund. We are a fund in Amsterdam that co-invests with the multilateral development banks in their projects. Ukraine for us is, and we are endowed by Europe's largest pension fund. And last year with the EBRD, we agreed with the European Commission that we could also utilize and benefit from the guarantee program of the EFSD Plus. And it, of course, Ukraine is a country that it also applies for. And I just want to say that the endowed wealth in the pension systems of Europe are looking at ways of also being able to engage together with the multilateral development banks such as EBRD and EIB, with the support of the European Commission that has already got programs in place. We have already got access to them. We've already agreed that with the European Commission. So we really look forward at the first opportunity to be able to work on these programs. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's not so much a question, but it's great information. If anyone wants to respond to that, or you just take it for granted, that's a good thing. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mattia Romani. I'm a partner at Systemic. I have a question related to the private sector. Some of you mentioned earlier the important role that it needs to play in the green transition. We are doing some work on behalf of the Ukrainian government together with McKinsey, thanks to the support of Breakthrough Energy, to look at what can the private sector do to be early on in the reconstruction of a green, better Ukrainian industrial system, starting from power. We've done quite a lot of work looking at where are the potential opportunity geographically, where could be the projects that the private sector is interested in. Now, that question is, we stumble into a block, and the block is that we need project preparation and project feasibility money to start doing the feasibility in projects that are high risk. So I wanted to ask, particularly Andrew at EIB, what are the potential instruments that EIB and other international organizations can make available for the private sector and the government to together start doing feasibility study to show the way for the green reconstruction of Ukraine? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, Ukraine will be the destination for our largest technical assistance programs outside the European Union. We have put together a 400 million donor fund, which will support both lending and technical assistance, with at least 30 million for next year going towards technical assistance programs. We have great partnerships in the country, including with the UN development program and other agencies. So very happy to discuss the modalities of applications for those particular programs. And we do have project preparation facilities in place. So yeah, very happy to guide you to the right places and support that particular process. Thank you.
Well, first of all, what you're doing, Mattia, is incredibly important, and what you do at Systemic is wonderful. And it's actually a useful role for philanthropy to come in and support you doing the kind of planning you're doing. With regard to project preparation, I mean, there are some pretty interesting innovations, as you know. For example, ACP, Allied Climate Partners, Mark Galogli's thing, which we finance. We put in funding to take first loss for that first 2-year period. As you say, the first 2 years up until financial closure is by far the riskiest, and it's extremely hard to get truly private money to come in. Up until now, it's been often grant finance through organizations like PIDGE and so on, that DFID financed and so on. But that, of course, is not sustainable over the long term. What one wants to do is make it attractive enough so at least the DFCs will come in and finance that first part. And that's what we're doing in Allied Climate Partners. And it would be interesting at the moment, we're working in Southeast Asia, Africa, and increasingly the Caribbean and India. But why not talk to them and get them to come in and think about Ukraine?
Thank you very much for the interesting panel. My name is Vasilina Balyo. I'm head of climate department of environmental NGO in Ukraine, EcoAction. And actually today we heard a lot about the partnership, especially of the partnership between the government and the private sector. But there is a key stakeholder, another key stakeholder, the civil society of Ukraine, which is quite active right now, especially in times of war. And one of the topics on which we are working in our NGO is green recovery, and basically the estimation of calculations of GHG emissions from the reconstruction. And actually on that part of the wall, you can see the estimation of around 56 million tons of CO2 equivalent of reconstructions. That's our estimations, which we are working on. So my question would be, do you see potential for cooperation or with civil society for enabling this green reconstruction? And if yes, what that could be?
I think this is a question for the government. May I give it to you? And maybe...
Thank you for the question. Actually, our government and the special ministries like Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Regional Policy are open to cooperation with all civil society agents, and we are keen to make the solutions which will satisfy all actors in Ukraine, like citizens, like business, like civil society. And let's look in detail for all proposals that you have, and we will proceed. Sure.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nobody's asked about the elephant in the room. Well, if you don't have a question and we have some time, I'm just going to pop the question. Others. Oh, Sharon.
I can ask about the elephant in the room.
Thanks for saving me.
So perhaps could the panel give us a insight or a view on how they see the outcomes of the American election in terms of this particular objective, or more generally?
Who would like to take that one? It's an important one.
Well, I think it's a unique opportunity for us Europeans to really step up our game, right? It's an invitation for us to stand together with Ukraine in a much more forceful manner. And already now, as Europeans, start looking at that holistic energy plan, both while the war is going on, but also in whatever post-war scenario we end up in. Really to come to Ukraine now with all the different facilities we have and build that green energy plan, because it's actually a unique opportunity for Ukraine not to start from scratch, but build a green energy system from the get-go, because of all the horrible been going on. So it's, for me, the election of Trump is an opportunity for Europe to really get our act together and step up now.
Thank you. And that's exactly the answer I sought, because that goes for all of us. And I think to round up, and then I want to give the floor to Gert-Jan and the Minister of Environment from Ukraine. But to round up what I took away, and I hope the audience took away, an immense resilience, an immense skill, technology. There's even money. The courage of the Ukrainians is unfathomed. If only now we all can summon that same courage, not only to help them win the war, but also to invest for a future now. Thank you so much. A big hand to this panel. And now we're really spot on time. It's not the end. We have two closing remarks. First from Gert-Jan Koopman, DG NEAR, and secondly from the final remarks of the Minister for Environmental Protection from Ukraine. Gert-Jan, may I invite you over?
Deputy Minister of Environment, Mrs. Kirilla.
Yeah. First, okay. Sorry, we have a different sequence. The Deputy Minister of Environment Protection. Thank you very much.
Вітаю всіх.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone.
Дякую за цікаву дискусію, яка насправді дуже важлива Україні, важлива українському суспільству.
Thank you so much for the constructive discussion, which is so important for Ukrainian and world society.
Ми говорили про дуже багато різних інструментів, які допоможуть відбудувати Україну зеленою.
We discussed multiple tools that will help to rebuild Ukraine in a green way.
Але я хочу окремо подякувати Європейському Союзу, також окремо подякувати пану Кутману, який долучений до відкриття в Україні кліматичного офісу, який є інструментом по впровадженні саме кліматичної політики.
And I would like to separately thank the European Union and Sir Hutman, who is involved in opening the environmental work and new office in Ukraine.
Тому завдяки нашим партнерам, завдяки фінансовим організаціям, міжнародним організаціям ми зможемо впровадити політику, а також, як сказала наш громадський сектор.
And as such, thanks to our multiple partners, we will be able to provide a new environmental and green policy in Ukraine.
Щодо відбудови повинні бути залучені не тільки урядовці, а й бізнес, а й громадськість, а також науковці.
As to rebuild the society in green way, not only governmental officials and entities should be involved, but also civil society and corporate sector.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would first of all like to thank all of you. Indeed, a panel that, despite the horrific situation in the country, is ending on a note of cautious optimism. I would say that it is very much in our own hands. And I would like to quote Morten, it's time for us to step up. We in the Commission are trying to pull out all the stops to make that happen. Both in terms of our policies, but also in terms of our financing. And I'm going to make a very concrete announcement. Yesterday in Warsaw, we launched an unprecedented initiative to give the private sector the possibility to submit to us directly these type of projects so that we can help structure them, work with IFIs to get them funded. So I hear there is a potential step up of 7 gigawatts. I'm suggesting, and that could be a very concrete result of today's panel, that we meet soonest to look at this project. I hear there is a financier here who's interested. We could make this happen. Let us try this. Thank you very much.